In this video, I talk about Chapter 2 of Barbara Ehrenreich's Nickel and Dimed. And Chapter 2 discusses Barbara's experience scrubbing in Maine. If you recall from Chapter 1, Barbara was working in Florida. She was serving in Florida, right? As a server in 2 different restaurants. For the first part of her time, she served in one restaurant, and then she ended up switching to serving in a second restaurant. The first restaurant didn't pay her enough money, basically, to be able to afford her rent and her food, so she ended up working in a second restaurant, and that didn't work out much better. Even though it was a larger restaurant and it paid a little bit better, like generally speaking, she would end up making the equivalency of $7.25 an hour. I think this is in about 1999, so we're talking maybe about $9 an hour in today's wages. But she still couldn't support herself. She did not make enough money. Right? She tried then to take a second job as a house cleaner in an adjoining restaurant, and that didn't work out well. She only lasted one day there, and so she ended up giving up. She said, "I had enough of this. I can't survive as a low-wage worker in Florida. It's too difficult. I can't afford my rent. This life sucks." Right? Even though I have a PhD in molecular biology, I can't survive these kind of jobs. It's too much physical effort. My bones are falling apart, essentially. Of course, Barbara's nearly 60 years old when she has taken on herself to perform as a low-wage worker. Well, so in Chapter 2, she says, well, let me go to Maine. Maine's a state where supposedly you have greater opportunities. They're always looking for people to work, right? There's all these advertisements and all these newspapers about people going to Maine and getting a job. So I'm going to go to Maine. Let's see if I can survive as a low-wage worker in Maine, right, in a way that I couldn't in Florida. Well, one of the first things that the author experiences that's a very great difficulty is she claims, again on page 54, that I needed a job, or I need a job in an apartment. But to get a job, I need an address and a phone number. And to get an apartment, it helps to have evidence of stable employment. So Barbara is facing this real difficult problem, right? This quandary. In order to get a job, I need an address. Right? But I'm going to have a difficult time finding an apartment unless I can give the apartment owners proof that I have a stable job. So it's that revolting problem that Barbara faces, and a problem that many low-wage workers are facing, according to what Barbara's claiming in this book. And I don't see any reason why Barbara's lying about this. Right? I think a lot of apartments do want to make sure you have a job, because otherwise, how are you going to pay your rent? Are you a drug dealer, and that's how you pay your rent? I'm sure there's all those kind of big questions, right? In a country obsessed with drug abuse and homosexuality, right? Not that our country has so many other things it should be obsessed about, but, we like to be obsessed about those things. But anyway, Barbara on page 59 notes that when she was being interviewed for these jobs, she's forced to take these personality surveys. And of course, these surveys are all about submitting yourself to the so-called right answer, right? These surveys have questions that the survey she took was called the Akutric Personality Test, but these surveys, all of them have questions that you're supposed to give the right answer to. And of course, the right answer is the answer that's desired by the corporate management. And anybody who's even remotely intelligent is going to figure out what the answers are, right? You're going to submit to giving the management the answer it wants to hear, rather than perhaps the answer that the management needs to hear, right? And a question like, how do you feel about the expression, management is always right? Right? You're supposed to circle, strongly agree, management is always right. It would never exploit its bourgeoisie employees. It would never help desire to create wage slaves out of the low-income workers. It is always right. It is always good, right? There's no exploitation here. No wage slavery, no worker alienation. But of course, corporate management can make wrong decisions. We all know that. Anyone with a mind knows that corporate management can make wrong decisions, and any honest employee is going to write on this survey, strongly disagree, right? Corporate management isn't perfect. Corporate management can be wrong, right? But that's not the answer they're looking for. They're not looking for that answer. And Barbara's even shocked about that, because she thinks to herself, clearly they know that, if we're putting strongly agree, that we're not putting the answer we really in fact believe. But see, that's not the point. The point is you're supposed to submit yourself. You're supposed to have your will crushed. You're supposed to do what the elite tell you to do, right? And if you're not going to go down on your hands and knees and beg for the job, please, please employ me as a minimum wage worker. I need the money. Please, please. You're not going to get hired, right? They want you to come groveling to them and believe that they're the gods and the kings and the masters of the universe, essentially. And Barbara notes that even though, she's cheating on these tests, she's giving the answers they want to hear. She also talks about the effect that it has on her, the effect that she feels inside of herself, inside of her mind, in terms of her power of her will, by submitting herself to becoming so low, so desperate to give these correct answers. The answers essentially, again, that this management is looking for, not the answers perhaps that management needs to hear. On page 60, she notes that in this new version of the law of supply and demand, jobs are so cheap as measured by the pay that a worker is encouraged to take on as many of them as she possibly can. So essentially, what Barbara's again saying here is, this is not a land of supply and demand, right? When the demand is high for jobs and the supply is weak, you'd think that the average pay would go up, right? That's how it's supposed to work in this laissez-faire, free market, Adam Smith acquiring to the cause of wealth of nations kind of society. But of course, that's not the way it works, right? All that they do is they advertise more to try to get people, to take the jobs for a low wage. They're not willing to increase the wages for these workers. Right? Instead, just take on a couple jobs, right? And we'll try to make the workplace environment a little more friendly for you. That's a joke, too, by the way. They claim that, but that's not what's going to happen. They're just trying to get you into the job, really. But they wouldn't dream of paying you a living wage. That'd be horrible. Well, on page 67 again, if you haven't guessed it already, Barbara Ehrenreich, she's an atheist. Right? She doesn't believe in a God. She goes to this one little tent meeting where she hears all these people, in their hypnotic Christian religious trance, right? We're all supposed to, say, Jesus gave us his, on the cross almost 2,000 years ago. He gave us his life so that, we can enter eternal life with him in heaven, right? All that kind of stuff, right? The just shall live by faith. For by grace we are saved through faith, and not of yourself is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. It's Ephesians chapter 2, I think verse 8. I don't remember. I'm kind of adding my own thoughts in here as well about probably what Barbara heard from my own experience with religion. That the idea Jesus and God love us all, right? If we just have a hypnotic sheep-like faith. If we don't try to question religion or use our reason or our logic, we just exercise our faith, God's going to take care of us, right? Well, Barbara walks out of that little meeting. Religion doesn't help her. She writes, Christ crucified rules, and it may be the true business of modern Christianity to crucify him again and again so that he can never get a word out of his mouth. Right? Jesus only makes his appearance here as a corpse. The living man, the wine-guzzling vagrant, and the precious socialist is never once mentioned, nor anything he ever had to say. And I think that there's some truth to that. A lot of churches don't want to talk about Jesus' more radical claims, right? The man strike you on the one cheek, let him strike you on the other cheek, right? Give to him who asketh, right? Oh, goodness, imagine that, for a bourgeoisie Christian to give to anyone who asketh, right? And if someone takes something from you, don't deny it of him. Oh, that would go over very well. That doctrine would go well, right? Oh, no. Of course it wouldn't. And nor should it necessarily, because I think we need to stand up. Someone slaps us on the one side of the face, I don't think we should turn over and say, here, hit the other one too. And that's a problem, of course, that Jane Eyre faces in Charlotte Bronte's novel, right? The idea that if we don't stand up to the evil people are going to get their own way all the time. But anyway, I don't want to make this video too long. There's a limit of how long I can make this video. So, let me just end this video by saying that Barbara, on page 69, she talks about having 2 jobs, a weekday job serving as the maids and a weekend job serving at a hospital for Alzheimer's patients, or a home, I should say, for Alzheimer's patients. She serves them their food and so forth, and sometimes cleans up after them, right? Again, these are both very low-wage jobs. Well, in this next video, I want to talk more about Barbara's experience serving as the maid, some of the challenges she faces. I hope this video was interesting and that maybe you learned something from it.